When I was growing up, my parents would occasionally tell me the story of the time they played the Ouija board. It was when they were dating before I was born, and they had a crazy night with it, where it answered all kinds of questions. There's one thing my parents are not: liars. So these stories only intrigued me to find out for myself. When I was 17, I was a senior in high school, and I had my first serious boyfriend. We were both very curious to know if the Ouija board truly worked, so we bought one. My bedroom was in the basement, and we set it up on my bed. It was close to midnight. We lit candles, turned the lights out, and sat cross-legged on the bed on each side of the board. We were supposed to pick a question and focus on it, with our index finger lightly touching the planchette. The question we decided to ask was, will anyone talk to us? We must have sat there focusing on that question for about 40 minutes, occasionally shaking our hands out from them getting tired of being held in that position. After about 40 minutes, the planchette started to vibrate underneath our fingers. Then, it slowly moved to the word, yes. We stopped for a moment and looked at each other, like, is this real? Then we asked, are you a spirit? And it moved away from the word yes and back to it. At this point, I noticed that I could feel a strange electricity moving throughout my body. I didn't like it. I've never felt it before or since. We decided to ask, are you nice? And it very quickly moved to the word no. Now I am riddled with terror. I exclaim that I cannot play anymore, and I go to pick the board up and put it back in the box. Except the board will not move. Not a sliver. It felt as though it was stuck there with cement. I remember yanking with my entire body at least 3 times before suddenly it felt as if something got off the board, and I flew backwards with it in my hands. I slammed it into the box and closed it. My boyfriend's face was pale. He tells me, I have to go home. And I'm like, oh my God, don't leave me here. But he leaves. Here's where it gets even more scary. After I walked my boyfriend to the door, I went back down to my room. Only, it didn't look like my room anymore. Don't get me wrong, nothing changed visually. It was still all my stuff. But I felt like I was in a parallel universe. I felt so far away from all that is comfort and good. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm not a religious person at all, but I was so beside myself with terror that I didn't know what to do except grab the Bible. I slept with it in my arms with the lights on. I actually slept with the lights on for the next week. I did not tell my parents what I had done because I didn't want to get any trouble for playing the Ouija board in the house, or for my boyfriend staying over way later than he was allowed to. We played it when everyone went to bed. My room continued to not look or feel like mine for a couple of weeks. Also, when I would get up for school in the morning, I would have to walk through the dark basement living room to get to the stairs because there was no light switch by my bedroom door for the living room, and my bedroom door was in the back corner of it. So when I would first open my bedroom door, the light in my room would cast out into the living room darkness, and for a split second I would see a black cat run from the patch of light into the dark. I would shake it off as my eyes playing tricks on me, but after a couple of weeks, I was eating breakfast upstairs with my family and my 7-year-old sister exclaims out loud, I keep seeing a black cat in the basement. That confirmed that it was not a trick of my eyes. Also, about a month after playing the Ouija board, my dad says to me, I don't know why, but the basement and the stairs have really bad vibes, and it's bothering me, because when I bought this house, one of the things I liked was that it had a good energy. That's when I realized for sure, without a doubt, all of this stuff was not in my head. I had haunted my parents' house by playing that game. I learned after the fact that I was supposed to say goodbye before stopping the game. I think that had something to do with it. Another strange thing that happened, I always slept with my bedroom door locked. A few weeks after playing the game, I woke up in the middle of the night to somebody jiggling my bedroom door handle violently. In the morning I asked who was messing with me, but everyone acted like I was weird for asking. About 6 months after playing it, my stepmom was cleaning the house. I found the Ouija board and threw it away. Things started to calm down a little bit after that, but it took years for that basement to feel okay again. And honestly, it never went back to feeling the way it did before I played. I finally owned up to my dad and stepmom about what I had done. I wasn't in huge trouble, but my dad was like, I knew the house felt different, damn it. To this day, I feel bad for bringing that energy into the house. After that experience, I want absolutely nothing to do with Ouija boards. They're not allowed in my home. I learned.
A short time before the encounter with the shadow entity, my friends and I were playing at my house. There were about 4 of us. I don't exactly remember. I had a lot of friends in my neighborhood, about 3 years of my age. I was very young. We were bored and decided to play Monopoly or something. We had a closet full of board games. This was the late 70s, by the way. While digging through the games, we found an Ouija board. Not sure where it came from. It didn't just appear or anything like that. My father built the house and Parker Bros made them, and they could be purchased at most department stores. My older brother probably bought it, I don't know. I'd seen one on TV, so I kinda knew how to use it. My friends and I started asking questions, and the planchette started slowly moving. They were dumb kid questions, and I don't really remember them. Except for one. Convinced that one of my friends was moving the board, I decided to ask something to prove whether it was real or not. Everyone swore they weren't moving it. The questions were mostly yes or no things, and it moved with purpose. I didn't have a clue what my mother's age was, never had any reason to think about it, and didn't care. I'm sure my friends could have cared less about it too, so that's what I asked. The board started moving again, pointing to 2 numbers. My friends asked me, "Is it right?" I didn't know, and they were like, "Damn it, why'd you ask?" I just said I don't know. We said we were done, and it moved to buy. A little freaked and bored with it. We put it away. When Mom got home, I asked her, "Mom, how old are you?" She told me, and the board was right. This was an odd experience for a couple of reasons. I was so young, I didn't know or care. I'd never have a reason to wonder or care about this. My mother had me at a late age, so she was a good decade older than my friends' moms. I was a little freaked out about this, but I really just found it strange. And after that, the rest was history.
Today I wanted to share one of my experiences with the famous Ouija board with you. When you are interested in the occult and paranormal, then you will stumble someday over that thing. Over the years I have tried it a few times. Mostly nothing happened. But there were moments it actually worked. And there was one that was really special. I thought this experience might be interesting for some of you. But before I begin with the story, I wanted to mention that a Ouija board isn't a toy. Many people, also the people in the story, try it for fun. They think it is a game. But regardless of whether you believe in such stuff or not, never do a Ouija session unprepared. And again, if some of you don't believe me, that's absolutely fine. I'm not angry at you for that. It happened 6 years ago when I was 17. It was Halloween, and my girlfriend and I attended a Halloween party. We had a lot of fun there. As it became very late, a few people had the idea to try a Ouija session because someone brought a board to the party. I did a Ouija session with my aunt before, in which we tried to talk to a certain person, but sadly nothing happened. And I was a bit drunk, so I thought it would be fun. My aunt would have been absolutely angry with me because you always should do a Ouija session with a clear mind. It could be a bad idea when you are drunk or high, but being drunk wasn't our only mistake. Again, when you are doing a Ouija session, then always be prepared. Do it with a practiced person. Inform yourself. Buy frankincense and candles. Prepare questions and do it with respect. You don't know what you could bring into this world, and it could be dangerous. But let's get back to the main story. In the end, we were 6 people that wanted to try it. My girlfriend and me, 3 other ladies, and a guy that I will call Norman for this story. The Ouija board belonged to Norman, but he did not try it before. We went to a quiet room so the other guests couldn't disrupt us. So we were sitting in this room, which was only lighted by 2 phones, and we thought that it would be fun. I don't know how long we were sitting in this room and yelling the questions against the board. 2 of the 3 girls became bored and decided to go back to the party. That was also a big mistake. Never break the circle when you are doing Ouija. Well, in the end, there was just Norman, the other girl, my girlfriend and I, who tried to summon a ghost. We asked questions again and again, and then something happened. When Norman asked for the 100th time if someone was there, the planchette began to move slowly. We did it. Finally, we had contact or something. Norman then asked who the presence is that was with us in the room. We got a name, Luca. Norman was very happy that something was happening, and he went on talking to Luca. A few moments later, we found out that Luca was a little 8-year-old boy. At this point, I got a bad feeling. My grandpa was a demonologist and did research with paranormal and occult things like ghosts, demons, and other things to find out more about it. In his notes, he mentioned that evil entities like demons often like to disguise themselves as little children because they seem harmless, and so was Luca, harmless and friendly, like a little child. Norman had a lot of fun talking to the boy, but soon the other girl and my girlfriend also noticed that something was odd. The whole atmosphere in the room was just bad. Then, one of the phones broke. It belonged to my girlfriend and it was a new one, just a few weeks old. I said to Norman that it would be the best if we stopped this, but he didn't listen. After a while, we didn't get the right answers anymore. The planchette just moved to random numbers or letters that didn't make any sense. Also, a weird sweet smell came up into the room. It didn't smell good. It was disgusting sweet. I remembered what my aunt told me about Ouija sessions and the answers you can get. When the answers to your questions don't make any sense, then you should stop immediately, because the thing you called is mocking you at this point. It would be stupid to go on. Finally, Norman also decided that we should just end this, because he was annoyed. But you can't just go and leave the board there. You have to ask the entity you are talking with if you can stop the session. But every time we asked, the planchette was moving to no, and something like that can be a huge problem. The thing was mocking us, and we became a bit afraid. Norman and the other girl wanted to go, but they could be persuaded to stay a little bit longer. Luca's game took longer than we would like. Every time he responded with just no or senseless number or letter combinations. But finally he responded with yes, and we could say goodbye. It was truly bizarre how the atmosphere changed after that. It wasn't threatening anymore, and also the disgusting sweet smell was gone. The girl left without a word to us, and Norman was very scared after the whole experience. Days after that, I saw Norman again. He didn't look very good, like he was sick. We talked a bit, and he told me that he got rid of the Ouija board. He said that he had terrible nightmares after that, and he always had the feeling that something was watching him. He is better now without the board. This was the only Ouija session I had where something like that happened. The other ones were very harmless. Interesting, but not that spectacular. And hopefully, Luca, the little boy, is back where he belongs. So this happened during the summer of 2010. I believe it was the summer between my junior and senior years of high school. At the time of writing this, it's been about 10 years. As most teenagers do in the summer, me and my friends hung out really late. Most of us were also kind of horror buffs and used to mess around and try and find paranormal things around us. Ironically, we never really experienced anything at all strange, much to our dismay, until this night. It was sometime after midnight, on one of those nights where it doesn't really cool off that much, even after it gets dark. 5 of us were hanging out at the time. Everyone's names aren't necessary, except for one. We'll call him Charlie, for the sake of his privacy. We decided to head back to one of our houses to relax and hang out. This friend had said that ever since she was really young, she had experienced odd and creepy things in her house. After sitting around in her basement, attempting to cool off, someone suggested we mess around with a Ouija board. Admittedly, I kinda sighed at this. I always thought Ouija boards were stupid, but my friends wanted to do it, so I figured, why not? We did the whole setup, turning the lights off and putting a candle in the center of the circle we were sitting in. Setting the mood, you know. The basement wasn't entirely dark, as there was a small window close to us, and light from the street came in from outside. The first few minutes were pretty uneventful. The piece didn't really move at all, and we asked all the basic questions a few times. After about 10 minutes, we asked the question of, is there something there? And the piece started slowly moving. During this whole process, Charlie's girlfriend and myself were the ones holding the piece. I can firmly attest to this day that it didn't feel as though anyone was moving it. It's hard to describe, but it didn't feel like the way it would move if it was one of us sliding it. It slid over to yes. We continued on and asked it a few questions. We asked if it was the spirit of a person one of us knew. It once again slid the piece over to yes. At this point, things started to feel a little too real, and we all sort of looked at each other and asked if any of us were screwing around. Everyone denied, of course, and the tone of seriousness and hint of unease made me think that they were telling the truth. We asked several more questions, trying to narrow down who this spirit might be. Not all of them received quick answers or any movement at all. But when we came around to Charlie, he asked if it was a family member of his. After he asked that, it moved to yes, but a little faster than it did when it first started moving. If there's something you should know about Charlie, it's that he takes his bond with his family really seriously. He's always been super close to his parents, his siblings, and all his extended family. In all the years I've known him, I don't think I've heard him say a single unflattering thing about any of his family members. It's this fact that makes me think he wouldn't use something like a deceased family member as a tool for some joke or prank against us. Charlie's face got a bit pale after this, and the air in the room started to change. It almost started to feel like there was someone watching us, creating that sort of hair-raising unease. This may sound like a vague statement, but it's the best way I can think to describe the feeling. He then asked the spirit if they could spell their name. The piece started to move, a little quicker again, and spelled out a first name and half of a last name. After it stopped, we looked at Charlie to see his reaction. To our surprise, he had gone even paler, and tears had begun rolling down his face. I asked him if he knew the name, and he just responded with, "Yeah, that's my uncle. He died a little over a year ago." That was when it really hit us that this was more than we had bargained for. Charlie said he had been really close with his uncle before he died. We asked him if he felt okay with us continuing or if he wanted us to stop. He wiped the tears from his cheeks and said he was fine and wanted to keep going. Charlie's girlfriend asked, "Are you here to protect Charlie?" It moved to yes once again. We asked a couple more questions that we got mixed answers to. To be honest, after 10 years, I've forgotten some of what was asked. Before we ended it, Charlie had one last question. He just asked, "Will you sit next to me?" Now at this time, I had been sitting to the right of Charlie, with a bit of gap between us. After he asked that question, I felt a huge chill flit across me, and the area between the two of us was significantly colder than the rest of the room. Keep in mind, at this time it is around 3 AM on an extremely stale summer night, and we were in a basement that had no doors or windows open. This was, hands down, the most unsettling part of the whole occurrence. If I'm being totally honest, if I wasn't there myself and experienced it, I probably wouldn't have believed it if someone had told me. It was equal parts surprising and unnerving. After this, we wrapped things up, turned the lights on and composed ourselves. After hanging out another few minutes, we all went home for the night, shaken by what we had just experienced. To this day, the 5 of us have never actually talked about that night. It was one of those strange things where we just decided to bury it in our memories. If I'm being honest, I kind of wished we hadn't, because it was such a strange experience that I don't think any of us could probably explain to someone who wasn't in that room. Unfortunately, many of us have drifted apart since high school, and I still talk to them once in a blue moon, but not on any regular basis. And most of us don't live in the same town we did when this happened.
So I was around 15 at the time. I was super into demons and the occult as a teen. My siblings and I were staying at my Nana's house. It was the middle of summer, so we had spent the day in the creek. That night, we went to my uncle's house. He lived in an old farmhouse on her property. She had to work the next day, so we went there to be noisy kids. He was dating some woman who had 2 kids that were around the same age as my brother and sister. At some point in the night, we went to Walmart to buy a shitload of snacks and hit the $1 DVD bin for some classic horror movies. We were all on a high on sugar and 90 bagel bites. Telling ghost stories, our horror movies sucked. At some point, I bring up the fact I know how to make ouija boards and use them to talk with spirits. My uncle, the 6'4", 250-pound bastard of a man, eggs us on. So I make an ouija board out of a bagel bites box and magic markers. We use a shot glass from maybe Mississippi or Alabama on it. I just remember the Dixie flag on the side of it. Mistakes 1 and 2. We didn't have a candle, so we used a disco ball. You know, the ones that have a lot of colored dots and they spin around. Not the mirror ball type. Us girls started out circling the board with the glass, inviting something to join us. A few moments pass, long enough for all of us to get bored. Suddenly the glass jerks to hello, and our fingers all slip off. Everyone laughs and we were told to quit messing around. My uncle just kinda laughs and asks for a name. The glass spells out Ross. Full disclosure of all events are true, but I don't remember its real name. I'm just guessing for the sake of storytelling. But I remember it was short, only 4 or 5 letters, and a classic male name. My uncle fussed at us, telling to quit messing around that Ross was the name of the guy who built the farm. Ross would also happen to be a distant relative. We didn't know that. I mean, sure, we could have heard the name in passing. We put her fingers back on the glass. The girl is too scared to keep going, but my sister and I do. We put our hands back on the glass and circle the board. Our hands get cold to the point my joints start hurting. I also feel dread, and the temperature in the room is dropping, despite only using a small window AC, and it's the middle of a Kentucky summer. I ask if it's good or evil. It jerks to E before our fingers are forced off. Everyone is uneasy at this point. My uncle's girlfriend kinda starts to freak out and tells us to stop. I tell her we have to say goodbye. She ends up getting mad and goes to bed. So like any teens, we keep going. My sister and I pick up the shot glass, making circles in the opposite direction. We tell Ross we're done talking and thank him for his time. We all then do a small ritual claiming no evil and try to summon a new spirit. This time asking for a good spirit. After circling some time, we eventually get another hello. When we ask the spirit what its name is, it spells out Ross. We get a little angry and tell Ross to leave. I know my voice was shaking when I told him we were scared and he was unwelcome. The disco ball starts spinning like someone had their hand on the top. Only the bass is spinning slowly, winding the cord until it unplugged itself. We all just kinda watched, dumbfounded. My uncle immediately stands up and says it's time to go outside for a smoke break. There is a door in the living room that starts shaking like someone is pounding on it. That door is only accessible from the living room. A trailer was placed next to the house to give it extra rooms and a bathroom. So the door's blocked off on the side, whatever's trying to come through. We scramble out. My uncle first, and me last. On my way out, something grabbed my ponytail. My sister said something pulled it straight up. While outside, we tried to burn the board. This was just cardboard that frozen food comes in and Sharpie marker. My uncle is actively trying, but it won't light or stay lit. He decides to douse it in gas and toss it in the burn barrel. It takes an uncomfortable amount of time to burn. I remember watching it after the initial whoosh from the gas. Goodbye was the last corner to burn. My nana had a couple of farm dogs. They were friendly enough to us, but were aggressive and hated strangers. These dogs were losing their minds, barking at the house. After that, we were all a bit scared. Us kids go to my nana's house. Us girls sleep in the bed and all the boys slept on the air mattresses on the floor. The girl ended up wetting the bed. At breakfast, we all talked about having nightmares. They were different, but we all agreed our dreams had fire. Mine was being in a burning bed that I couldn't escape. My nana freaked out when she heard what we did. She called her priest and had holy water and oils within an hour. She took us to the creek and did a mock baptism with the oils and water while chewing us out. Then she took crosses to my uncle's house, putting them on both doors and his bedroom door. We went back to my nana's a lot. We'd see my uncle every time too, since he lived 300 feet from my nana. His house always felt cold and unwelcoming. Maybe 4 to 6 months pass. My nana's getting ready to feed all our animals and notices my uncle's house is on fire. Luckily, he survived. His bedroom was the last to catch. The fire department took a long time to get there and the house was lost. I think they said it was a cigarette he dropped that started it all in the living room. And that's it for the encounter.
A little backstory. My family is different. We were raised Christian, but a lot of the family did witchcraft. Not your typical witchcraft. Most of us either followed into or put that aside. I believe in things that most don't, but I don't practice anything. My brother, on the other hand, went into it hardbody. With that being said, onto the story. So I must have been around 23 or 24. I was living with my brother and grandma. My brother at the time would leave the house and not come back for days. He had a massive DVD collection, so when I was bored, I would either pick the lock on his door, or, if the key was available, I would use that. On this day, the key was there. So I went in and grabbed a bunch of DVDs and locked the door because I didn't want him knowing I was in there. I watched 2 movies, smoked some weed, and then got paranoid. So I go to place the movies back in his room. I closed the door and locked it. When I locked the door, I heard a sound, so I unlocked the door, and the door slammed into the closet doors. The way his room was set up, the door opens to the left. On the right of the doors was his double-door closet, so if the closet doors are open, he can't get out of the room. Being blazed, I thought maybe something fell in his closet, so I pushed one closet door closed and made my way in. I look around and realized there was nothing. So I was like, whatever, and closed the closet, exited the room and locked the door. As I locked the door, I heard the same noise. Thinking I'm just being paranoid, I unlocked the door and once again the closet doors were open. I push one door closed and make my way in. I look around, but only this time I felt the coldest shiver ever in my life. This kind of creeped me out, so I exited the room, locked the door, and that's when I hear the closet doors slam against the door again. Not gonna lie, it made me jump. I immediately run to my grandma and ask if he was there. She replies no, and I asked, "Are you sure?" And she said yes. So now I'm like, this guy is playing with my emotions. I unlock the door, close the closet door, go in. I'm like, stop playing with me, I know you're in here. Nothing. I start looking around. I look under the bed. Nothing. I look behind the bed. Nothing. Behind the curtains. Nothing. I'm guessing this guy is in the closet. I open the closet door. Nothing. I move the clothes around. Still nothing. I am now convinced I'm lit and it's just my imagination. I repeat the process. This time, I didn't lock the door. I run to my grandma and make her get out of bed and take her to his room. I tell her to listen. I lock the door and the closet doors fly open, slamming against the room door. She says, "What was that?" I tell her and explain what was happening. She says, "Well, he's in there." I push the closet doors closed, take her in, show her the room. She's like, something must have put pressure on the door. We exit the room, I lock it, and it happens again. I say to her, "See?" She turns, slaps me in the face and says, "Keep that kind of shit to yourself," and walks away. I push the closet door closed, go in. I'm like, whatever you are, you're not welcome here. I exit the room again and lock it. This time I hear one closet door open. Curious, I open the door. The closet door furthest from the room door was open. I close it and that's when his lights turn off. Mind you, this whole time the lights were on. That scared the bejesus out of me. I turn them on, exit, and lock the door. I hear it again. My dumb lit ass goes to look. Closet doors are open, lights off. I push in, close the closet doors and look in. The room was a lot darker, almost like you couldn't see anything, even with the light coming from the hall. I turn a light on and run out, scared shitless. I leave the door unlocked. Around 11 p.m. my brother comes home. I rush to him and I say, "You want to see something creepy?" He looks at me with his pale face and says no. But I was like, well, you're gonna anyways, and I take him to his room. And he asks me why the key is in the lock. I come clean and tell him the truth. I tell him to lock the door. He looks at me and says, "I don't want to." I squint my eyes, now knowing he knows something. He makes a big fuss but locks the door. We both hear that shit, and he starts spilling the beans. He tells me some voodoo guy he knows gave him an original Ouija board. He continues that, since he got it, he was having nightmares and hearing things. So he left the house for days. So I say, "You leave here and don't say anything?" And then he tells me, "I thought it was all in my head." He takes it and I thought he left with it. Instead, this guy puts it in another closet that has a skeleton key lock. Doesn't say anything. Leaves the house for another 5 days. He comes home, spends like 3 days in the house. For those 3 days, everyone is hearing the doorknob jiggling, but we don't know where it's coming from. I ask him, "You got rid of the Ouija board, right?" He turns. super slow and says with this stupid look, "No, I put it in the small closet." When he says that, we hear the doorknob jiggle harder. So we go to the closet and you can see the doorknob moving. The thing with that closet is that there is no inside doorknob. I tell him to go in there and get rid of it. He says he's scared. What if it tries to eat me or take my soul? I tell him, well, that's your fate. It is what it is. He takes it back to the old voodoo guy. That's when the old voodoo guy tells him that he found that Ouija board in the Amityville house in the late 70s, early 80s. After that day, my brother stopped doing his weird stuff and started going to church. Till this day, every time I talk about it, I feel cold shivers and get goosebumps.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.